1 Mid-Ocean Drive, St. George's, Bermuda, will say as follows. 1, I am president and a director of the Mid-Ocean
This is Facebook.
Club Limited, MOCL. 2, on behalf of MOCL, I attach and tender to the Commission of
This is what's
Inquiry
being sent out to
a
Facebook.
copy of the private act of the Bermuda Legislature,
Just turn that off.
Bermuda, 1951, number 70, titled, quote, the Mid-Ocean Club Act 1951, end quote, which incorporated, paren, and brought into existence, close paren, MOCL.
And if I pause that, Madam Justice, you should have that part of your pack, these copies. Could this be labeled Exhibit BS1?
The Mid-Ocean Club Act 1951?
Yeah, indeed. And we just refer to that as Exhibit BS1, that's convenient. Thank you.
3, if the commission wishes to know more about the history of MOCL, how MOCL came into existence, and how it came to buy the property from the Furness Whitty Steamship Company, there's a short history on our website at, and then there's a website link. Date, November 17th, 2020, Ben Sullivan.
And Mr. Sullivan, I'm now going to show you a document which is a 1951 conveyance. And Madam, I believe it's part of your pack as well. It should be, it's got this indenture, it's a legal conveyance document I'm familiar with.
Thank you.
And Mr. Sullivan, this is a conveyance of the property known as intimidation to MOCL, dated 1951, and is this the conveyance which passed the property, or where MOCL bought the property from the Bermuda Development Company Limited?
Yes, I believe it is.
And Madam, you'll see it's conveyance in standard terms, it's got the price in there, it's got the maps and what you'd expect, and the back of the exhibit BS2.
You're going to enter them as exhibits?
Please, just the entire indenture of BS2.
Okay. And it will be under his initials.
Yes, BS. It's simply a commercial document. And Madam Justice, I will then necessarily tender Mr. Sullivan for examination by the learned Commission Counsel and the from you or fellow commission.
Indeed. So it's BS1, which is the Mid-Ocean Club Limited.
Yeah, yes.
BS1, and then there's BS2, which is the indenture.
The conveyance, exactly.
Thank you. Council Harrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Sullivan. Good afternoon, sir.
Oh, good afternoon. Excuse me, I was passing council.
Because this is a commission of record, I'm going to ask you to assist me a little, if you can, in respect of your statement where you refer to the midoceanclub.com/web/pages/history. I'm not certain if you could assist me with some of the history, even though you have ably directed us to the site. It is a court of, it's an inquiry, so we need to actually take a note of it rather than us virtually going there and searching for the information. We have to have it on the record. Are you able to assist me with the history? I have some questions. If you are unable to answer, then anything that you're unable to answer, I'm sure it will be referred to another time. So just bear with me. Are you, I think it's without reference to the website, the furnace with the steamship company, you bought the property that you know exists on from them, correct?
I believe that's the case.
Okay. And when I say you, I don't mean you personally.
The Mediation Club.
I make reference to the documents which have been referred to and which make specific reference to 100 acres. The MOCL Mid-Ocean Club Limited, what is the acreage of the establishment now?
I don't have a specific number for that.
Is it more than 100 acres?
I believe it is, but I don't know a specific number.
And to the liberty of looking at the website, and I noticed that the statement appears on the website, and please bear with me, I refer to an extract. The club remains loyal to its noble beginnings. The dedication to excellence and the unwavering devotion of its members and staff remains as true today. So the noble beginnings, what noble beginnings can you say reference is being made to? What are the noble beginnings of the club?
I do not know what that refers to.
I took it from your website. Let me just. Are you aware of the history of the land which was owned by the company that you purchased, well, your company, your club purchased? Are you aware of the history?
I'm not familiar with details.
I'm going to take it on that track. Are you familiar with a petition that went to the House of Assembly here in Bermuda in the year 1920? A petition which had been placed before both houses of Parliament. Are you familiar with that history?
No.
Are you familiar with a petition that had been laid before the Houses of Parliament by residents of St. George's and Hamilton parishes? It was against a bill entitled the Bermuda Development Company Act. Are you familiar with that history?
No.
Are you familiar that a law was passed in the Bermuda Parliament which was known as, the Bermuda Development Company Act number 2? Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Are you familiar with the fact that not only was it the intention, but in fact it actually, let me read it to you, forgive me.
Sorry, what is being read out?
I'm going to indicate shortly. Just one moment, please. Madam Chair. I am reading from the petition, a petition of residents of St. George's and Hamilton parishes, I'll show you a copy shortly, against a bill entitled the Bermuda Development Company Act number 2, 1920. It's a petition of certain freeholders of the parishes of St. George and Hamilton, where a bill entitled the Bermuda Development Company Act number 2, 1920. And from an extract in paragraph 1 of the said petition, it reads, the Bermuda Development Company Act number 2, 1920, which among other things provide for the acquisition of the lands in the said parishes of St. George and Hamilton, particularly described in the first schedule to the said bill, and in the manner in which such lands can be acquired by the said company. I pause there. Can you say in which parish Mid-Ocean Club Limited, what parish does it occupy? Can you say?
I'm actually not certain.
Do you know what parish you're in now?
I'm not certain.
Are you aware that it was the intention, and I'll come to whether or not in fact it happened, that the intention was to displace all persons in the name of development, remove all persons who lived in the said parishes in the name of tourism.
What was the question again?
I am going to finish it.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. The petition I referred to earlier, the petition of residents of St. George's and Hamilton parishes against a bill entitled the Bermuda Development Company Act number 2, 1920. The petition was laid before Parliament by petitioners who owned land in the parishes of St. George, known as Tuckerstone, and a portion of Hamilton parish adjoining thereto. Are you familiar with that history?
No, I'm not familiar.
This is just my run-up. I'm coming to the question shortly. Are you familiar with the Landwich Mid-Ocean Club Limited now occupies? Prior to 1920, Bermudians, black and a few whites had lived there and that they were dispossessed of the land. Are you familiar with that fact?
No, I am not familiar with that.
Are you familiar further that having been dispossessed, a number of Bermudian blacks and whites, that the company from whom Mid-Ocean bought property, furnished with a steamship company that they owned and dispossessed the land from the Bermudian blacks and some whites? Are you familiar with that fact?
No, I'm not.
Are you familiar with the fact that the land that many Bermudian black and Bermudian whites had been dispossessed by the expropriation which benefited Furness with the steamship company, that it caused much anger among Bermudian people? Are you familiar with that fact?
No, I'm not familiar with that fact.
Are you familiar with the fact that the lands that Mid-Ocean Club occupies now, it is to this present day, hour and time, 5 minutes to 2 in the year of our Lord, 19th of November 2020, it still resides with much anger of Bermudian people having been dispossessed of their land. Are you familiar with that fact?
No, I'm not familiar with that fact.
Are you familiar at all as to the terms of reference of this Commission of Inquiry? Do you know why we're here?
I don't believe so. I don't know specifics, no.
I'm going to just read something to you. Reverendo. I'm going to ask you whether or not you have heard this statement or words to this effect. I'm going to search for that document, which is a public one, but I'll go on to something for the time being. If you could assist me. This is taken and evidence given by a number of historians, it appears in a number of articles. Have you ever heard the term "come to Bermuda mid-ocean playground"?
I'm not familiar with that specific term.
Have you ever heard these sentiments? As gratitude to furnace with the building of hotels, one, special legislation was passed to foster meal delivery. Have you ever heard that?
Not familiar with that.
As a gratitude to furnace with the building of hotels, new roads were built. Have you ever heard that?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
As a gratitude to furnace with the building of hotels, crown lands were sold to the company. Have you ever heard that?
I'm not familiar with that.
As a gratitude to furnace with the building of hotels, they were allowed to dredge Castle Harbor.
Import the HDMI.
Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that.
So we gotta take it back. It's on his laptop.
There's a. Are you familiar with any part of the history as it relates to the expropriation of land?
No, I'm not familiar.
I'm just going to read an extract from a document which appears on the website of the Bermuda, government of Bermuda, as also the Commission of Inquiry website. And it's under the heading of Commission of Inquiry into Historic Losses of Land in Bermuda. And the scope of the commission here is to inquire into historic losses of citizens' property in Bermuda through theft of property, dispossession of property, adverse possession claims, and or such other unlawful or irregular means by which land was lost in Bermuda. At the end of the process, the commission will collect and collate any and all evidence and information available relating to the nature and extent of such historic losses of citizens' property. Prepare a list of all land to which some historic losses relate. And identify any persons, whether individuals or bodies corporate, responsible for such historic losses of citizens' property. And it continues, but I'll just end. Those are the general terms of reference for the inquiry. Have you ever heard that before?
Not before you read it to me.
Mr. Sullivan, you know why you're here today?
To represent the Mid-Ocean Club Limited.
And you're representing them against what they ask?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I was asked to be here, so I'm, like a better word, obeyed the request to be here, or prepared to be here based on a request.
Thank you. Would it be more in line with your files that Mid-Ocean owns near to 600 acres of land in Bermuda presently?
If that's a question, is that a question?
It is, sir.
I'm not familiar with a number of that nature.
Are you able to assist whether you have acquired more property than you acquired in 1950 when you bought from Furnace with the steamship company? Have you acquired more land since then? Are you able to answer that?
I wouldn't be familiar whether the Mid-Ocean Club Limited has acquired more land.
That is, you just don't know,
I just don't know. That's correct.
but you could find that out for us.
Could I find it out? I could potentially seek to have somebody find it out. That's
Yes,
where I could find it out.
If it's of assistance, if there's any questions which the Commission's counsel wishes to, they can translate it in the usual way and answers can be given. Any specific questions will be answered if they're just channeled. I mean, we didn't come prepared to answer specific questions, but obviously if we're told you're interested in something, we'll get the input. You know, and indeed, we're just here to provide documents. We did not exist at the time of the relevant event. So but obviously, if you want any, then we have to provide.
Please, thank you. Thank you very much. And as I had indicated at the commencement, if there was anything that I had asked that you could not answer, no, you could at a later time provide that information. Thank you so much. I'll continue nonetheless and continue.
Take this system down the block. Come right there. Looking good. Okay, I'll be back before you.
Mr. Sullivan, earlier today, before you arrived, a witness who represented Tucker's Point during counsel, Mr. Mark Pettingill, apologies, appeared. And a matter directly unconnected to you, but I share it nonetheless before I ask my question. It touched and concerned the old Marsden Cemetery, which appears along the golf course. As I said, unconnected to you, but more particularly connected to Tucker's Point. On behalf of Tucker's Point, Mr. Pettingill, in my words, stop short of apologizing on behalf of the owners for wrongs that had been committed against Bermudan blacks and a few whites, where lands had been expropriated and these Bermudans lost everything. Some of whom were handed cash, some got cash and land. There's a debate which is moot, that there was no consistency as it relates to the compensation that was offered to the dispossessed Bermudians. Are you aware, Mr. Sullivan, have you ever heard of Bermudans who had occupied lands on which mid-ocean is now situated? Have you ever heard of any Bermudans being dissatisfied with the compensation that was offered to them, having been dispossessed of lands which are now on which mid-ocean is situated? Have you ever heard that?
I'm not familiar with any specifics.
Do you know anyone in the Mid-Ocean Club Limited organization who would be possessed of any of this information to know any of this?
No, I'm not aware of anybody.
Is there anybody who is in the Mid-Ocean Limited, Club Limited, from whom information or the files that one could garner or understand the history of the lands that you now occupy? Is there any existing person you can think of?
No, I'm not aware of anybody.
Are there files in your offices to indicate prior to acquisition in the 1950s to understand the antecedent history of the occupiers of the land prior to the 1950s?
I don't believe so.
Are you familiar with a requirement that upon the acquisition of land and for the land to be transferred, that there needs to be some sort of a structural survey done? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not aware of that technicality now.
In the simplest form, are you aware before now or no that Bermudans, I say mildly, quite upset in respect of the history of their forefathers and lands which have been lost? Are you familiar with that history at all?
I'm not sure I can comment on that. I don't have,
Well, you can comment, either you know or you don't know.
I don't have awareness, knowledge.
And your counsel is there to protect you, so let me, before I ask the question, warn him so he can object. As far as you're aware, Bermudans, up to the time, well, from the time, how long have you been, I'm sorry, my apologies, how long have you been president and director?
President since December 2019, so 11 months. And I've been a director, I believe it's for 5 years.
So you really can't help us very much. Just not very long. Let me try another way. Are you aware at all that there is a lingering, the word angst is used, A-N-G-S-T, among Bermudians as it relates, and over the 5 years you have been a director, that there is a deep-seated discontent among Bermudians, blacks and whites, going back almost 100 years, having been dispossessed of lands under the name of expropriation to advance tourism interests. Are you familiar at all with that antecedent history?
I don't have specific knowledge of that.
Do you have general knowledge?
I don't have enough general knowledge to speak to it.
You have some, then share it with us. We're here.
I don't have enough to speak to it.
Tell me what you know.
It would be if it was anything, it was something I may have read in the press, whether it be Royal Gazette or News, something along those lines. Doesn't go beyond that.
Is it something that you're concerned about as it relates to the image of Mid-Ocean Club Limited? Is that something that yourself and your club that you're concerned about, the image or the perception as it relates to Bermudians, black and white, having been dispossessed of land going back 80 or 90 years, even before you were owners? Is that something that concerns you or it doesn't?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
I don't think I'm in a position to answer that.
Let me repeat it then. Because that's not what you were going to do today, sir. Respectfully.
With respect to the council, I'm not sure how this assists the commission. This line of questioning is simply seeking to humiliate my client, who didn't exist at the relevant time, by asking questions whether we're concerned about past events for which we're not responsible and we're not around at the time. So I'm not sure how this helps. Trying to pry out an answer which is, shall we say, is embarrassing either way. How's this helping the commission in this inquiry? I don't understand.
Council, could you just lightly touch on the object of your questioning, because I know commissioners can comment on it, but you might wish to comment on the line of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank my friend for the direction he seeks. The line of questioning is in keeping with the terms of reference of the commission, and certainly one thing, rather than me indicating no, which is tantamount to me giving evidence, is an understanding of the antecedent history. And speaking, please allow me. I love you. Thank you. Is to understand the antecedent history of this matter, and to get a further understanding. There is an appreciation on the part of the witness who is called as to what has happened, what he has inherited, and since that time, without giving him too much direction in terms of where I'm going, an appreciation that if something happened in the past and the company is now, for all intents and purposes, on all fours, assuming a position that a previous owner had, there may be some responsibilities which they need to consider. Simple question. That's the arena.
I think the question is whether or not Mid-Ocean Club Limited should show remorse for events which took place 30 years before Mid-Ocean Club Limited existed. Now, I'm not sure my client is authorized to express remorse on behalf of Mid-Ocean Club Limited, full stop, and in any event, in relation to events which took place 30 years before the company existed. So it's an impossible question. I'm happy for my learned friends to ask it, but this is not really.
Certainly, Mr. Adamson, the questions that I hear council asking, they're factual questions.
It's a factual question.
And either, Mr. Sullivan is able to answer them or he's not able to answer them. And I think that that's the appropriate approach.
Yeah, if the learning council knows can repeat the question, I'll probably interrupt it slow. As a factual question, then of course my client should answer.
Council, any other comments?
I have nothing further. I would just, if you permit me, I just continue.
Continue.
And just to be clear, nobody here needs to embarrass or seek to do anything. We're just seeking, it's a fact and admission. Just a moment. Excuse me. Mr. Sullivan, I'm going to give you a scenario. And if you can assist me as based on the guidance of Madam Chair, either you can or you can't. I'm just trying to understand a little bit. I'm learning too. If tomorrow you're advised that a special development order has been made and that all lands owned by Mid-Ocean Club Limited are ordered immediately expropriated, how do you feel?
I don't believe I can address something like that like that.
Or let's put it another way. Suppose you're advised tomorrow that a law has been passed and all the lands on which Mid-Ocean Club Limited exists, they're being taken away and they will be handed to Bermudans. Every bit of land that is owned will be taken away and given to somebody else. How do you feel?
Again, I'm not comfortable answering a hypothetical like that.
Okay, I'll move on then. I'm almost finished, so thank you for your cooperation so far.
Any your re-examination?
Oh, nothing, I don't think the council only has us in it.
No, I'm not quite, I just, I'm almost done, thank you.
Okay.
You have been a director for 5 years, and earlier I had asked a question of you, which I had referenced the website of Mid-Ocean Club Limited that you had so kindly directed us to in your statement, that the club remains loyal to its noble beginnings, the dedication to excellence. Could you just share with us what are the noble beginnings of the club?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with exactly what that statement references.
I have nothing further at this time. I'll just ask Madam Chair that there is a likelihood that I'd like to reserve the right to recall Mr. Sullivan. I trust it's convenient to him and to council. But I have nothing further at this time.
I have commissioners here, and I will try some questions. Mr. Starling would like to.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, we-
Thank you for coming today. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one quick question. You said you've been the president for the last year and the director of the board for 5 years as well, correct?
Correct. I believe it's approximately 5 years.
How long have you been a member at Mid-Ocean Club?
I have been a member of Mid-Ocean Club since sometime in the late 1980s. I'm not sure precisely the year, but late 1980s.
Okay, that was just piquing my curiosity. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Sullivan? Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I'm beginning to wonder what you can answer for. I'm astounded by your ignorance in these matters. Just referencing the Mid-Ocean Club documentation, I see that there was an initial acquisition of 200 acres. Is there a master plan, in layman terms, plot plan, boundary survey, which reflects the extent of the property acquired?
The 1951 acquisition, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm not certain. We could come back to you with that. I don't believe there's various subplot plans. I haven't seen a master.
So you'll get that information for us?
We could determine whether there is one.
Right, it says 200 acres in the document. So,
The reason I'm pausing, I know over the years, whatever documents they might be at the Mid-Ocean Club from time to time have, whatever, unrelated to what we're talking about now, I find have, been lost and disappeared. Hurricane Fabian took a lot of files away, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I'm not saying certainly we can deliver to you, but we'll look into it.
So, Commissioner, you're looking for a master plan of all the land belonging
to the Mid-Ocean,
Club Limited?
in the first instance.
In 1951.
Secondarily,
That's as of today.
pardon?
That's as of today, 2020.
No, at the acquisition?
Oh, yeah, in 1951.
Yes. And then, subsequently, if the club has acquired more, because according to this document, it should be at 200 acres. Unless there is supplemental information which gives you a different tune. Because this is the act that governs your property ownership, is that correct?
That's what I understand. When I glanced at that act, it looked like there was a specification of 200 acres.
Right. So, am I correct to understand that anything exceeding 200 acres, the act would have to be modified?
I'm not familiar with how that works, but I
So you
did,
got your counsel right
I
next to
did
you.
notice the 200 acres in the act.
Would you be able to advise if that's the case?
I get that. Again, if these questions are rather helpful, we'll get them answered for you.
Please. And the rationale behind this is part of the antecedent history would be that the property was expropriated for specific purposes. Part of the responsibility of this commission is to get to the truth. So what we would also like to do, get the information from Mid-Ocean, is in subsequent development and use, can you advise us if you've obtained more property? And we'd like to determine, or if you can advise us, that the use for tourism, and it's all spelled out in your act. We would like to determine if there's conditions that have been met.
Would it be helpful if I liaise with your council to get a list of questions which the commission would like to have the answers to? Because
Absolutely.
we obviously come not knowing which areas you'd be interested in. We're more than happy to try to get you answers in specific and to assist. For us, sort of, we can go into our archives and see what we have. We obviously do not exist in the 1920s, is the point which I've labored, but we can help you in 1951 onwards.
Is there anyone in the organization, and Council Neal sort of touched on this, I'm still a little throwing it back. Is there any historian, knowledgeable person within your organization that can attest to the historical developments and undertakings of the Mid-Ocean Club?
When you say Mid-Ocean Club, do you mean Mid-Ocean Club Limited?
Mid-Ocean Club Limited,
So from 1951 onwards?
or before?
Well, we didn't exist before.
Well, what led up to it? I'm just asking, is there a knowledgeable person in your organization who knows the history of the
We
organization?
don't have any historians within the club. We can give expert evidence in terms of what we do.
Okay. So you're saying there are no old people in your organization who will be knowledgeable of the organization, of the establishment?
I'm saying we have no expert.
I didn't say expert.
Well, if you want us to look for people who are members of the club who go back to the 1950s or the 1920s, I mean, we can ask if they'd be willing to come along and be interviewed by the commission. But I would love to help, but I mean, I'm not, Mr. Sutton, Commissioner, I mean, you are asking, you're saying, why don't we know more about what took place in the 1920s? I think you know the answer. You're asking, why don't we know more? You refer to ignorance. You want to know, you're asking us, why don't we know more about events which took place before we existed?
What I'm asking you is, within your organization, I already accept that you guys are not the guys who have the answers. I'm asking you if within your organization, you have the knowledge base to provide us with that information. That's all. You would know your organization. I don't.
I think the answer is no, but we can obviously answer, if you ask a specific question, we'll try to dig around and try to come up with like what acreage we bought, master plans to do the best we can. But in terms of coming up with like a historian's report and what took place. All we have is a website, which is not, frankly, an authorized history in the sense of like an expert report. It's simply a policy to focus on golf on the island.
Okay, thank you
I'm
very
sorry
much.
not to be more helpful, Commissioner, but we'll
So am
obviously
I.
try to-
Thank you very much, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sabo. Mr. Parenti.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Adamson. I take it that as a club, you would keep minutes and records of meetings held annually or otherwise. Is that correct?
I know for certain in recent years, the 5 years I've been on the board, and there may be records previous to that. I know for the last 5 years, but previous to that
Yes.
also. May be the case.
From 1951, at the time that the Medicine Club acquired the landholdings of Furnace City, I opine that there would have been meetings held and minutes of those meetings would have been held somewhere. And should this commission require or request records of minutes, would they be available to this commission? Should we do so in writing?
I'll turn to council here for a specific request like that. How to deal with
If
that.
it exists, then of course we can.
I would think that an esteemed club such as ours, such as Medicine Club, with lawyers, members of parliament, and persons of some stature would retain records of meetings. Certainly, if they were to acquire land, transfer land, acquire shares, etc., etc. And I'm asking, should this commission request copies of those records or sight of those records, would they be made available?
Yes, do so.
Thank you.
Ms. Ford?
Yes. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
I just noticed in the back, there are several memorandum of deposits or transfer of properties. Were they all prepared by one law firm, Conducive and Perrin? Various individuals, right?
It does look like it. I believe there are, relation has used different law firms in more recent years. But I'll certainly, I think you're right, Commissioner, in terms of all these ones here, up to 1980 is common, yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering if maybe that particular law firm, Conducive and Perrin, may have any relevant or information pertaining to the properties prior to
Prior,
51. Do you think they would have any knowledge?
doubt it.
So were they the company that, maybe the Mid-Ocean acquired the property in 51, that was Conducive and Perrin, were they the law firm regarding the conveyance of property to the Mid-Ocean?
I'm not sure Conyers was the attorney in 1951. I could see that.
Would you be able to provide us as to who the attorney was?
Who the attorney is,
The firm, company.
who is the firm who put together the 1951
Yes.
original conveyance? We can find out.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. B?
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
We have a letter that was submitted as an exhibit dated 20th of October 1954, marked confidential, from the colonial secretary to the resident manager of the Mid-Ocean Club Limited, Town. Are you aware of this letter?
I'm not familiar, don't believe I'm familiar with it.
Is your counsel familiar with it?
Familiar with section 54.
Do you mind if I read it to you? Should they have signed one? Okay.
Yes. Chair, I don't think, I just asked that the document could be shown to the witness before the questions are asked.
Have you seen this letter before?
I certainly.
No.
Okay, so this will give an indication of one of the reasons you're here today. And I'd like to read it for the benefit of those who do not have a copy. It says, I am directed to refer to your letter of the 7th October in connection with the sale of land at Tuckerstown to Bermudians and non-residents of Bermuda. Your executive committee is no doubt aware that the original intention of the undertaking at Tuckerstown had as its object the development of the tourist trade and hotel business in the colony, and especially in the Tuckerstown area. Purchases of land in the club area and immediately bordering on the club golf course had to be members of the club, and they coveted to use their houses for residential purposes only. To enable this project to get started, former residents of the Tuckerstown area were forced to sell their properties and had to seek other homes in the colony. There have recently been several sales of property in the area to Bermudians, and it is doubtful whether this conforms to the original purpose which land was compulsively purchased or acquired. Your executive committee will appreciate that if there is any change of policy, the persons who were forced to sell their properties may well have genuine grounds for complaint. It is for these reasons that His Excellency, the Governor and Council, is seeking a clarification of the present position. And also to inquire whether, as a matter of policy, all persons to whom land within the club's property is sold are required to be members of the Mid-Ocean Club. I am, sir, your obedient servant, the Colonial Secretary. So the reason,
I'm sorry, Commissioner, could you just give us a date so it could be in the record, the dates of that document?
sorry,
Could you just give us a date so it could be in the record, please?
20th of October, 1954.
Thank you.
So that will give you an indication why you are here. If you don't know the complete history of the lands, the land holding from the point of purchase in 1920 to the point of the acquisition by the Mid-Ocean Club, there is a history which cannot be dismissed because you can't or you don't know the facts. If you could, what have been a response to this letter? If you can look through your archives and provide the commission with the response given from Mid-Ocean Club, given their reasons as to the on sale of property and whether it was within the original intent and purpose for which the land was purchased.
You can certainly look into that request. If there's nothing in the archives, you can see what we have and come back.
That would be appropriate. Thank you.
Council, is there anything arising? I believe that's the last question of commissioners.
I would ask, Madam Chair, that a document could be tendered if there's an exhibit.
That could be exhibit from the commissioner's exhibit.
It's already exhibited.
Yes.
But I just make it known on the record, it's already an exhibit, so I
Okay.
just, the exhibit was on.
Mr. Stubbs, counsel?
Yeah.
And this is the date of that letter.
So here's October 1954.
1954.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, it is projected on your screen directly in front of you.
I have to turn.
No, it's only private.
Oh,
I'm not as agile as I used to be. Very well, I made a note that, it has been read into the record, and it can be found in Mr. Stubbs' exhibits.
our previous witness.
And, I suspect, a number of questions will be sent to you, Mr. Adamson, both from council and the secretary in relation to matters that, we would like some answers to. And council, is there anything you wish to ask now arising from the questions of commissioners?
Nothing at all, Madam, I'd just like to thank Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Adamson for their cooperation.
Fine. And, I believe you indicated that you may wish to recall them at some later stage.
Depending on the answers that we get to the questions that are posed.
So, that is so noted. And that's the end of your evidence today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask Reverend Whelan to resume his seat and for us to continue with his evidence.
Thank you, Madam Justice, and to commissioners.
You still sort to tell the truth, Reverend.
Yes, I will. And
I don't know if Mr. Tucker is going to be speaking as well, but you're still sworn to tell the truth, Mr. Tucker, if you're called upon to do so. And counsel, they are now sworn to tell the truth.
Thank you, Madam.
Yes, counsel, thank you.
I will try to move very quickly. I just have a few slides. We left off talking about the application and planning. And basically, the reason why that is put before us because we really.
I'm sorry, you just, the document had this, like, give me a person, it's there now. No, I was asking for you, sir, it was not there earlier you were speaking to, but go ahead.
Yes, okay. So, basically, in my feeble attempts trying to dispel the notion that the trustees of the church operated with any kind of criminality, especially given the case that we were informed during prior testimony that a complaint had been lodged in 2014 with the police department. And just to be clear, in our understanding, for what the trustees went about in work of restoration, to have that classified as desecration or as any kind of a criminal act would need a sense of an ill intent or to be acted in a way in which one was doing destruction to property not their own. So I just wanted to just be clear about the mindset of the trustees and what their motive and intent was. One of our trustees, we refer to as Rocky Down, would give me this quote whenever I would come upon him when he was in the midst of work and I would question something, and he would say to me, "Don't comment on unfinished work." And so this shows a before and after picture. And basically what happened in 2012, in the midst of the work that was intended by the trustees to be a work of restoration, it was stopped and halted, but there was a process. The end intent was reflected in the plans that were submitted to planning. And there is in the bundle of material that was submitted a letter dated 12th of February 2013 from the director of planning, or to the director of planning, planning, department of planning. And this letter is from the architectural firm that operated on behalf of the church, facilitated by Dr. Ed Harris, and it specifies what the intention was at that particular time for the cemetery to have a monument there. And what this schematic shows is not the actual monument, but it just gives an example of something that that we had in mind. The intent was for a memorial reflecting a broader representation. The dozen or so tombstones.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, your screen is not projecting.
No, it's not working today. Yeah.
Is this what you want?
Yes, but then I was just trying to facilitate the commissioners who are turning around each time.
Yeah, that, for some reason, that connection's not on today because of that. Yeah.
Is it on the screen now?
No, it's not.
No, that connection's not functioning today for some reason.
Oh, that connection's not functioning.
Yeah.
Okay. So I apologize. Then the schematic, this was the actual part of the package that was submitted for planning submission. And it shows the pictures of the cemetery. After some of the work was done, which I said is like, was unfinished work, it was part of an intent to have a memorial there. And what is reflected in the picture is only suggestive of what was the intent of being considered. The intent that the trustees had was for broader representation. Part of.
Sorry, Reverend Whedon, could you just take us back to the slide? I'm just trying to understand. That is exhibited there, that's just a representation of what the trustees had in mind to do.
Right.
So
That's not the actual monument.
Okay, so the pictures in the top right, the extreme right top, that's an actual picture, and the one beside it is an earlier one. Are those actual pictures or are those something else?
Well, certainly there are actual pictures of the cemetery. First picture on the right is definitely a picture that reflected the work that was carried out under the supervision of Dr. Harris, to our knowledge, by Rosewood Tucker.
Okay. And just to assist us,
And
and
to 2012.
just to guide the commissioners, on the same slide that you're showing, on the left top, that just shows gradient, says location plan. Just how we have to say it, because the record has to reflect it when the transcript is being prepared. Somebody reading the transcript needs to know exactly what was happening. So I'm asking.
I believe what it shows is a view from the southwest, and the other one is a view from the northeast.
Okay.
That's what's listed in the caption.
Okay, thank you. And what you're showing us at the bottom right-hand corner, that was just a projection of what the trustees would like the cemetery wall at the old Marsden Cemetery to look like. That's what that is.
This did not originate from us. So this originated from the architectural firm that was operating with Dr. Harris facilitating this. This was not what we actually intended.
Okay.
It was just suggestive of what we wanted to do, the intent.
Okay, so also the intent, but you're showing us also, this is what Dr. Harris had presented to the trustees as something that you could consider to do. To the architects.
No, we had talked about having, as Mr. Tucker mentioned yesterday, the intent of the trustees was to restore the cemetery back to its original state. The other intent with regards to memorializing it was the fact that the concrete slabs did not truly represent the extent of the cemetery, those who buried there. It gave the impression that there was a limited number of people buried there, only that it was a small area. And so the monument idea was to reflect the broader scope of those who were buried there and the ancestors of those.
Thank you.
And so this was the first step of a process involving a broader collaboration with stakeholders to determine what would be appropriate. So the intent was to have a memorial that would capture the many lives of ancestors buried in Tarpus Town. And so this is reflected on the timeline of what happened afterwards. In 2012, October 29th, and this is on the statement that is presented, the timeline, A meeting was held by Morrison Church requesting input from the community on how the grave sites should be memorialized. And November the 6th, 2012, there was a meeting between myself, Mr. Tucker, and two members. My recollection was Mr. Eugene Stovall and Mr. Keith Dubois and Dr. Harris to discuss the submission to the planning, to the Department of Planning. So the plans, the ideas and everything were discussed with them. I recall Dr. Harris being very much impressed with what Mr. Stowe, Eugene Stowe, had collected, the research that he had done, and the information, and offered that he could provide individuals with expertise to help him to really actually chronicle all the evidence and materials that he had from those associated with the Tucker Sound community. And there were some preliminary discussions about how those legacies could be properly memorialized. Going from that, there was a meeting that the former ombudsman, who was very much concerned about the stakeholders, and she had interviewed for her report, she had interviewed extensively the various stakeholders, trying to mediate a lot of the tensions that existed. She noted in her report a great error, that when they had the big conversation, Morrison was excluded, and that Morrison did not like the fact that they were excluded, as if their role as custodians of the cemetery did not matter. When they had the visit to the cemetery, Morrison was not involved. And then on the other hand, she noted how individuals of the Tuckerstown Historical Society were very much upset and affronted by the fact that they had, in quote, been left out of the loop when the decision was made to do the restoration work at the cemetery. And so, in trying to arbitrate between these tensions, she called a meeting on July the 3rd. I was in present, but Mr. Tucker was there, as well as the others who we mentioned here. She presented Dr. Janet Ferguson and Mr. Glenn Public to serve as arbitrators, leading the process for healing and reconciliation. There was members from the planning department there, the Bermuda National Museum was there, I believe Ms. Winfield from CURB was there. There was CURB representation and some others. And so that meeting did not meet with any kind of fruition going forward. The current ombudsman, Victoria Pyramid, and there's been other efforts that have been taking place. The church has been endeavoring to try to bring some reconciliation of the matter. But on September the 18th, the current ombudsman held a meeting with myself, our current chairperson, Sinclair White, of the trustee board, representatives. There was 2 representatives from Tuckerstown Historical Society were present to try to, along with Leon Jonas, to have a way forward in terms of dealing with addressing concerns with Roosevelt Tucker's Point. And that's why when Mr. Mark Pettingale stated he was willing to get with myself and with Mr. Tucker, I noted the fact that we would not be moving forward solo. The church recognizes the need for others to be at the table to bring forth a reconciliation. So I'd like to just make 4 points in summary, then I'd be done. One is unfortunate that other stakeholders were not consulted before the concrete tops were removed. I personally, in questioning Mr. Dubois and Mr. Stowe, expressed that, that was regretted. But that's not an admission that the church was operating in any kind of way that could be called criminal. So secondly, we find the unsubstantiated claims that the graves were dug up, bodies removed, repugnant, and actually counterproductive to the process of healing and reconciliation. Thirdly, Morrison supports efforts to determine the actual physical scope of the cemetery by determining the graves beyond the current boundary wall. Mr. Tucker just mentioned that repeatedly. And 4, Morrison supports the broad-based coalition of stakeholders to collaborate on the way forward. We're not taking the lead on that. Fortunately, thankfully, the current ombudsman has agreed as a neutral party to try to lead forward an effort. And we're willing simply to work with all stakeholders to restore the cemetery, bring a sense of reconciliation and community. Let me say this. 2023 would mark 100 years after the last person was expropriated or from Tucker's tank. It would be good if prior to that time, the work could be done, because we could celebrate in that time the legacy. And so one of the things I think is this actually my last point in the summary, is that Morrison advocates for the redirecting of the writing list. I think that is key and essential. It has to be done. It's our point. Okay. It has to be done because desecration cannot be okay under any kind of circumstance. The continued desecration. This is 2 weeks ago, I went to the cemetery. This is the actual picture of the cemetery now. This is the actual picture of the cemetery now. It's overgrown, and actually, if I might be permitted, this is the state of affairs. If you look, this is a little video as I walk through, and you can see the condition. It has not been kept up. The net, whatever netting was there, is not there. So it has been really since, and that's where the wall was, part portion was taken down. But it's shameful that it is in this current condition and state. So what we are hopeful for is that we can have reconciliation, move forward, stakeholders in agreement on how best to honor and to restore
I'm sorry.
even the gate there.
I'm sorry. Could you just go back, because are those balls in there, those yellow things on the front of those balls? Could you just in the very old time way of saying rewind
This is towards the end of it.
No, but if you just go back, you just go
I
back.
get you.
Yeah, those are golf balls,
Stay there with
Yeah,
this
those are
one.
golf balls.
And you said this was taken when?
2 weeks ago.
It's either one or the other. Can't do both.
I did a walkthrough. And, yeah, so that concludes. I don't know if Mr. Tucker.
Yeah, and it's just a few things that I wanted to be able to make clear. That I wanted our evidence to be able to show what Marsden has done in order for us to get this situation sorted out. It's been a series of things that have happened over a number of years. And the end result is, this is what it looks like today. And it is pathetic. I understand Tucker's point of view and the fact that they came in 2017, and I understand that. I don't know if he understands what the cost is going to be, and that's going to be for Tucker's point to be able to deal with that, to redirect the golf course, because it involves two sides of a fairway on either side of the graveyard, as well as the actual golf club is built up on the hill where the driving range is. And he had mentioned that he don't know what it would cost and what it would be to fix it. But it's going to be, in my view, it's probably going to be expensive, but in my view, it needs to be done. That's the bottom line for Marsden Church. But I want to be clear that the church has done everything that is possible for them to do up until this point. And the fact that we don't own all of the land that is around the graveyard, and we've tried to get it fixed on numerous occasions. And I just want to be clear on that as a
So we
representative.
want to
of
clear
the
it back on to you. So why didn't you like
I have no questions, Madam Chairman. I just asked that the PowerPoint presentation is, I don't think it was tendered as an exhibit. That's my application to the J
No,
and
his
W
just goes up to the projector.
08. This one.
We could go and do HDMI one, or, you know,
How do you
change
characterize
it,
this
or
council?
you can bring a split.
It's a PowerPoint presentation which supports
This is one,
the
1 and a 4.
evidence of Reverend Whelan. And I'm
Think about
asking
that.
that it be made exhibit JFW7 PowerPoint presentation, which has a short video attached, which was taken some 2 weeks ago.
Thank you. I've entered it as JFW7, the following presentation that supports from my Williams and Mr. Tucker's presentation.
Those are the matters for today. As I have no questions, I'm not sure if the commissioners or you, Madam Chairman, have questions.
And,
Your commissioner,
I don't believe that Ms. Ford has one. Go ahead, Ms. Ford.
Just for clarification, good afternoon, and Reverend Pastor Wayland. Just referring to this article that was written in the Bermuda Sun, November 29th, 1996. And it indicates that Marsden minister, Reverend Peter Tink, said the graveyard was a real mess. He said, and this is all in quotes I'm reading from, he said he discovered it when he was playing golf and found himself staring in an open grave. So based on this article and the quotes here, I just want to know whether it is the norm for pastors to play golf at the mid-ocean. And if so, did you, Pastor Wayland, play?
No, I was actually given a set of golf clubs. I was offered a set of golf clubs if I would just go golfing one time with someone, and I didn't. And, but anyway, I've never picked up a golf club. Reverend Peter Tink was my predecessor, and he passed it. Marsden and Centenary were on the circuit. And I do know that there was at least one member of Centenary who was a member of the Mid-Ocean. And so he was probably on the golf course by invitation of this member.
Okay. And second question,
Just to be clear, we don't have any access to get able to play golf for free down there.
thank you, Mr. Thomas. The second question is, or are you aware of the Reverend Tink had notices, was there a formal report given to the church of his findings? Is there any sort of record that he bring it to the vestry? Is it in the minutes that he discovered this? Just wondering if he made a proper formal report about his findings when he baked this golf for you.
Just for clarification, at that particular time, Reverend Bailey wasn't there, obviously, and I was the chairman of the board of the trustees at that particular time. But he did bring it to the trustee board, and I think that's what sort of started this whole process. And by the time Reverend William came, I think he knew about the golf course, the graveyard side at that particular time. And we started to work on things, really from Reverend William's report. He was actually an interesting gentleman because he was actually from Australia. And he came to us via Canada and was a very integral part of the church. He helped a lot with the Sunday school children. He knew all about cricket, which threw him right into field comics background. And he pushed us on making sure that something happens with it. And I think that's what started the drive for us to do. But a formal report, probably not. But that's what started the process for.
Thank you for that information.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Mr. Fowler?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions for you, just to clarify for my own timeline. Would it be correct to say that between 1923, when the church relocated to its present site, and 1990, early 1990s, when Reverend Tink was playing golf, the church had minimal custodianship or maintenance of the graveyard?
You are correct.
And then I would be correct to say that from the early, sorry.
No, I wasn't at the mic, I'm sorry. I just had to talk to the mic. So you are correct, yes.
Thank you. And then from the early 90s, when Reverend Tink assisted with the erection of those concrete slabs over the rooms, as per what I read in that newspaper article you saw yesterday from the Bermuda Sun. Then you guys were active through to what I have in your timeline here to 2013, March 18th, 2013, which is when you note the ombudsman issued a press release announcing her investigation into the disappearance of gravestones. For your edification, I'm referring to Marsden 001, I guess. I don't know, your opening document in here. We've got the blue.
Yeah.
Then there seems to be a gap between 2013 and 2020. I'm just trying to understand what happened between that period. If there's anything.
Well, Curve submitted an objection. Curve was joined with my Tuckerstown Historical Society with regards to the plans that were submitted to the submission to planning. And so that halted everything. We had the July 3rd meeting with the former ombudsman, right, in 2013, wait a minute. It was, okay, it was on my slide. The July 13, 2013, I believe it was, July 3rd, 2013, was when the former ombudsman Arlene Brock had called a meeting, right, 2014, excuse me. And it just kind of ground to a halt. And so, contrary to what some had thought, the church is not just simply been sitting on the fence, but the process was objected to. And there hasn't been a sense of coming together, bringing the stakeholders together, except for the current efforts with the current ombudsman, Mrs. Victoria Kim. Hopefully, things will progress. Hopefully, given the indication today from Mr. Mark Pettingill, there can be a meeting with all of the stakeholders, and we can try to move things forward to do whatever is needed there in the center. The church is not opposed to anything, whether it's putting the concrete slabs back or whatever, to properly memorialize the site.
Madam Chair, with your indulgence, can I ask one more question?
One more question, remember that we have a timeline.
And the military will get this up. You include, thank you, Madam Chair. You included in your submission here a number of correspondence between yourself and the Tucker's Point. Was there any correspondence beyond the most recent one I have? This is your July 13th, 2011 correspondence where you sent to the minister and CC'd them. And were there other correspondence that are not included in your submission?
I can say definitively that there have been no official correspondence, definitely since 2012. There's been no communications. Okay. No,
Okay, thank you for the little green men come.
Can I just add, if I may, just add one thing? If you look at that picture, that was done 2 weeks ago. And I know that Mr. Pettingill had mentioned that Rosewood cannot see that was a graveyard. I find it pretty hard to believe by looking at the videos that you just showed. And that course is kept impeccable, both Castle Hall and the Issue Club, that they couldn't understand that was a graveyard, and that it should have been kept up without that. I understand what he was saying, that they weren't aware and all of that, but just the physical scene of the graveyard. And the plaque is right there saying what is actually there. I think I'm challenged with believing that they weren't aware that it was a graveyard.
Thank you.
Council?
I have nothing, Madam Chair. Those are the matters for today. I'm advised that we may not have any matters tomorrow. To resume on Mondays at first.
Resume on Monday, yes. So thank you everyone for participating in today. We'll adjourn now until Monday morning at 10, resuming at 10, unless you hear otherwise from us. And so some people did last evening. But I believe it's going to be 10 o'clock Monday morning.
I believe, if I might ask, but our part, in terms of, it's ended, we're done.
You're done.
Yes.
Well, if you're done, you're done.
Unless we hear from you again.
Yeah, you don't need to call you again unless you have something else you wish to present.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.